Hello and welcome to my review of the Necrons Seraptek Heavy Construct. Now this model will set you back £173 or £210 with one pair of weapons. This one here is equipped with the Singularity Generators. You can also get the Synaptic Obliterators and Transdimensional Projectors. That's kind of one weapon in one, there's not like three. That weapon itself contains both the Obliterators and Transdimensional Projectors. We'll look at those in a moment. This is an expensive model, as I say, £210. It is a Titanic model for Necrons. It's from Forge World. It counts as a Lord of War choice. Ever since I saw it, I knew I just had to have it. I love supporting the Xenos armies, and especially when Forge World gets on board and makes these big creatures or constructs or whatever. I'd love to see way more Eldar models and Tyrannid models. It's very similar to an Imperial Knight. It's kind of their version of a Knight. We'll go through the rules a little bit later on because it does have 8th edition, or should I say 9th edition, 40k rules. There are going to be many juicy size comparisons later on. It's a Titanic unit, so of course I'm going to compare it to all the other Titans. I'll just explain a little bit about the model itself. We'll look at some detail, we'll do the size comparisons, and then we'll go through all the rules. So firstly, it's what you'd expect from Forge World. It's a resin model. It went together relatively straightforward. There were some tricky parts, and I'll go into those in a moment. There was a fair bit of slippage, I have to say, pretty much on all the legs, the insides of the legs. Weapons weren't too bad, some of the piping, but it was a challenge. If you're thinking about getting one of these, and it's going to be as easy as making a plastic Necron figure or miniature, it won't be. It's a pretty tricky one, especially right at the end when you put it in a pose. I've gone with such an ambitious pose. I don't think the laws of physics should allow me to have this pose on it. If you see the pictures of it on Forge World, it's got these two front legs forward and kind of resting on the surface on the table, and that's to give it more support. These legs are I want to say fragile. There's a joint there, and a joint there. The more joints it has, the more points of weakness it pretty much has, and couple that with a very small surface area of which to support its weight. And it does weigh a fair bit. It's quite chunky around the middle, and obviously these two legs, if you choose not to glue them forward, that's going to add even more weight. The beauty about the Titans, the other Titans that I have, is that the weight is quite evenly distributed. Everything from the Warhound to the Warlord, even with that massive carapace and body and torso of the Warlord, with all the weapons on top, the weight is distributed over those big feet. But this, it kind of tapers down. You've got a lot of weight up top, and it kind of funnels it down to these small contact points. So you know, if one of these fails, you're scuppered pretty much. Anyway, I've gone for such an ambitious pose here. These you don't need to glue if you don't want to. I've left them unglued so I can pull the sort of blades out or retract them. They were a little bit bent, but that's just easy to get around. Just use the hairdryer and sort of bend them into the place you want. You will get some slippage along the legs and things. I'll just be very careful with him or it, but I've gone for this kind of hugging pose, sort of like an attacking pose, like it's about to strike on an unsuspecting Titan in a way. Or Dreadnought, or Redemptor Dreadnought, or something a little bit smaller than it. I doubt it would have been able to get in range of a Warlord, leap off a building on the top of a Warlord, but if it just attacked like this to a Warlord's, I want to say sort of shin, or tried to prise the armour off of its knee, it would get a huge kick in the face, and it would be kicked, quite a distance along the battlefield, no doubt. But still, this attacking a Reaver or a Warhound, possible if it could catch up to a Warhound. Anyway, enough about the sort of going on to the fiction and stuff. It does have these two weapons, and this is like the first time I've seen Forge World go about the weapon system in like a ball and socket joint. Pretty cool actually, and it does work quite well as long as you get all the pieces lined up. If you glue them as they are out of the box, the chances are they're probably not going to line up that well, so you may have to get the hairdryer and just sort of melt them into place so that that socket is tight but not too tight. You don't want to be pushing this so hard in that it breaks a leg off every time you change the weapon. But I really like that. You know, it's up to you. You can use their ball and socket system that they've got there, or what you could do is the attachment there itself slots quite nicely onto the weapon, and you could just put a magnet in there and then just magnetize this weapon or the other weapons and just slot them on. I need to buy some more magnets, so for me that wasn't an option at present, so I've just used their ball and socket joint, which, you know, works well. It's not loose, and if it did ever become loose for whatever reason, you could just hairdryer it into place a bit more, and then that would keep it solid. You know, this is an advanced model. Let's not beat around the bush. I wouldn't advise you to get this as your first Forge World model. It is a challenge because there are many parts of this that are kind of posable compared to kind of character series or models where you don't have any freedom of posing the model itself. And this sort of project can be seen as a culmination of all your kind of Forge World experience rolled into one. This gun's a little bit tighter, which is fine, but I could still pull that out and put the other weapons in. I've glued the legs. They are in there very solidly. I would suggest you pin them if you can. I really would. If there's one model Forge World to pin, definitely suggest this. Maybe you could even pin the arms. For me, it's I think it's going to be fine transporting it if you have it in a box, sort of laid like that. You know, like a big box that it won't rattle around too much, but because these are quite weighty, they're going to take the brunt of any movement. So as with any kind of big Titanic model, it's still going to be a bit of a pain to transport if you want to move it from battlefield to battlefield. You know, that's one of the prices you kind of pay for a Titanic model. But yeah, plenty of detail everywhere. It's very Necron looking. Everything from the you know, shared aesthetics with them, with the legs and the armor pieces and the glyphs, to the weaponry. Very kind of, I want to say archaic, but yet futuristic at the same time. Yeah, absolutely stunning model. I'm really pleased I picked one up. It's got this little bug type insect kind of face. A little bit reminiscent to the tomb spiders and things, and all the new Necrons that are coming out. I didn't get this for the new Necrons. I've had this model for ages, but I've just never got round to building it, and I've managed to do that recently. So I hope you know, this is quite topical with the new Necrons coming out. I hope you're gearing up for all those releases. I will be getting every single new release for the Necrons when they come out for 9th edition. So I hope you stay tuned to the channel for that, and I hope you really appreciate it. You might even see a painted Necron model, who knows? So yeah, absolutely stunning model. I really like it. Well, is it worth £210? Well, one way of looking at it is essentially twice the price of an Imperial Knight, but for that much resin and that much posability, if you want a focal point, you want a Lord of War for your Necron army, then yes, it is worth it. It's worth double the price. It'll take you longer to build than an Imperial Knight. You'll get a lot of hobby enjoyment. It'll boost your Forge World experience. I'm just glad that Forge World have built something new for Necrons, and with the release of the new models, I hope they do continue that, or at least, you know, give us something else at some point. So it's got the Singularity Generators. I'm just going to put the Synaptic Obliterators on and show you what it looks like with that. In my opinion, it looks better with the Singularity Generators, but hey ho. And that's what it looks like with the Synaptic Obliterators and Transdimensional Projectors. I guess these are Synaptic Obliterators, I guess. See what I mean? I think these just get in the way a bit. It'd be awesome if the arms weren't so high up, or I don't know, but yeah, that just gives you a taste of what it looks like with those weapons on. Okay, this is one of my favourite parts of the review, the size comparisons. So let's start off with some Necron models. Just move you over there, darling. Let's go with some scarabs first of all. Here's some scarabs, little scarabs there. You can see, you know, they're tiny compared to it. Let's start off with a Necron warrior. Yep, so yeah, pretty big compared to a Necron warrior. And then an overlord, a cryptek, and then a wraith. Actually, the tallest wraith. You know, so yeah, absolutely. I mean, the wraith doesn't even come up to its top of its one of its legs, does it? Let's face it. So there you go, pretty big model. Let's compare it to a couple of Space Marines. Okay, as always, here's a Legacy Space Marine and a Primaris. Yep, they don't even, well, Legacy doesn't even come up to the first indent, and the Primaris just about touches it. Maybe put a melter charge on one of its legs if you can get close enough. These things are quite fast. Here's I say human. Here's a legend of a model. Slimarbo. Maybe he could take it, maybe, I don't know, but just gives you an idea of a human-sized guy. And I know what you're thinking now. I know what's on the tip of your lips. Well, one of you at least, probably. Super, how big is it compared to a Tyranid Dimachieron? Because the pose you put it in looks very similar to the Dimachieron's pose. Well, it's the big daddy of the Dimachieron, let's face it. Look at the size of it compared to a Dimachieron. Yeah, I mean, what a little battle they could have, right? I'm pretty sure the Dimachieron would lose. But still, that looks really cool. I like that. I really do. So, yeah. Although the Dimachieron is pretty big, the Seraptek is a bit bigger. Okay, and then let's compare it to an Imperial Knight, which I've been banging on about, and I will show you I will sort of compare their rules a little bit. So there's your Necron equivalent. So as you can see, it yeah, dwarfs even an Imperial Knight. Cerastus Knight probably is about the same height. I don't have one, but it's probably about there, maybe. And that would be a better kind of comparison to this model. This model is more power points cost, but it has a similar number of wounds, attacks, saves, things like that. So in a way, it's kind of the Necron equivalent of a Cerastus Knight. But this is next to a model that you're probably more familiar with. So yeah, as you can see, if you brought one of these to the tabletop and the other person had an Imperial Knight, it's going to absolutely crush it. I would be wrong to compare it to like a Warhound Titan. Clearly that's not, you know, the actual size of a Warhound Titan. It's just an example. You know, a Warhound Titan is, you know, more than double the power points cost of this thing, and has a fair few wounds. However, the weapons are quite similar when you put it that way, but it is much slower and doesn't have the kind of void shielding protection that Warhounds have. I mean, it does have an invulnerable save, but yeah, more on that later. Okay, let's compare it to a Reaver Titan. Okay, you see what I mean about it potentially attacking a Reaver Titan or a Warhound. It is, you know, even raised with its front legs. It doesn't come up to the you know, hips of only just about gets to the hips of the Reaver Titan. So it just gives you an idea of just how big these Reaver Titans are. But there you go. I thought I'd show you it next to Dominus. What I'll do is show you it next to the Warlord Titan, of course. Wow, what an expensive size comparison it is today. I don't know many channels where you would get such a size comparison. Okay, so first of all, this is one of the Warlord Titan's weapons. It's a Bellicosa Volcano Cannon, and it is the largest weapon that Forge World do. If we just compare it size-wise, the weapon itself is way bigger than the model itself. In fact, the Volcano Cannon upright is taller than a Warhound Titan. Okay, and I told you it would be a bit of an odd size comparison, but there you go. That just gives you an impression of a Necron Titanic model next to a Battle Titan of the Legio Titanicus. You can see there, pretty much, it's barely higher than her knee, which kind of makes sense for other Titanic Knights. You know, they barely go up to the knee. And the Cerastus will probably go a little bit higher than the knee too. So I hope those size comparisons have helped. If you have all those models and you're thinking about getting a Seraptek, or maybe you don't and you just thought that that was such a cool size comparison. And something of import, I will be re-reviewing all of my Titans on the channel soon. With many size comparisons, so stay tuned to the channel for those. Okay, and now you've reached my part of the review where I will go through all of the rules for the Seraptek Heavy Construct. You will find them on Forge World's web store. Just click on the profile and there's a PDF, and just click on that and it will take you through it, so you can browse that at your leisure. It is a Lord of War choice for Necrons. It's a power points cost of a 32, points cost of 625. Please note that that includes, well, either one of those weapons. It says it includes the war gear, so it's just a straight up 625 points. So that's a whole 210 points more than a Imperial Knight Paladin armed with a rapid fire battle cannon and Reaper chainsword, not including a carapace mounted weapon. And comparing it to an Acastus Knight Porphyrion, Acastus Knight Porphyrion is about 830 points with its twin Magna las cannons, which has to pay 100 points each for. And rightly so, because that model is also power points cost of a 40, and its weapons could just punch out, not particularly more damage, but more shots at the same range. Anyway, let's focus on the Seraptek Heavy Construct. It's one of these models units that its movement speed is affected by its remaining wounds. It starts off with 28 wounds, which is 4 more than a Paladin and 1 more than a normal Cerastus Knight. Its movement speed is 16 inches, which again is faster than one of the Cerastus Knights. Its weapon skill is 3+, and ballistic skill is also 3+, and that is the same as those Cerastus Knights. And it can have that stat line if its remaining wounds are between 15 and 28. If they're between 8 and 14, it drops its movement speed down to 12 inches. And between 1 and 7 drops its movement speed to 8 inches. Oh, and also the weapon skill and ballistic skill 4+ respectively, and then 1 to 7 it's 5+ respectively. So those two don't change, but it means that even if it's only got 2 wounds remaining, it's still 8-inch movement, which is, yeah, quite fast really, considering. Its strength is 8, its toughness is 8, it's got 28 wounds, 6 attacks, leadership 10, and a save of 3+. So it's got the same strength and toughness as the Cerastus Knights. It's just got 1 extra wound, 2 more attacks, a better leadership, and the same save. It's a single model equipped with 2 Singularity Generators and Titanic forelimbs. So these Singularity Generators, which mine aren't equipped with there, they're equipped with the Transdimensional Projectors and Synaptic Obliterators. But the Singularity Generators, they are a 36-inch range, heavy 3d3, strength 8, AP -3, and damage d6. And each time you roll a wound, roll of 6+ for the weapon, target suffers 1 mortal wound in addition to any other damage. That's pretty decent. You know, you get 2 of these. Let's say you get a 5 and a 6 on the D3. You've then got 18 shots of strength 8. Then when you're wounding with those 18 shots, you know, you're probably going to get a few 6s, and then you're going to get those mortal wounds. So although it is a short range of 36 inches, its effective range is, let's not forget, its effective range is 52 inches. You know, so it can move this thing can move the 16 inches and then fire those things at 36-inch range. Very effective still. Don't be put off by the 36-inch range, especially as it moves 16 inches. The other weapons, which I've just now equipped mine with, which are the Synaptic Obliterators and Transdimensional Projectors. They're basically the same weapon in one, but they're called different weapons. It's rare that the same weapon has 2 different sort of names. Typically it's one named weapon and it has 2 profiles. Anyway, the Synaptic Obliterators themselves, it's a range 72 inches, so that's an effective range of 88 inches. So very long range there. It's a heavy D3, strength is 16, AP -4, and a damage of 6. Let's just compare that to the Porphyrion's long-range weapon, the twin Magna las cannon. Now that bad boy is also a 72-inch range, but it's a heavy 2d3, so you've got potential of having 6 shots there instead of just the 3. But that strength of the twin Magna las cannon is only 12, whereas this thing is strength 16, and it's a better AP at -4 instead of the -3. But the damage is only half again though, so the damage is only D3, and it's a possible of D3, whereas the twin Magna las cannon has a straight up damage 6, which is just amazing. But it's worth note that the Synaptic Obliterator, they don't have any extra abilities on top of that. So very, very decent long range weapon. You can imagine getting 6 shots of strength 16 at damage 6 and AP -4. There's not much that can withstand that kind of punishment. Even the Knight Castellan's Volcano Lance, which is slightly longer range of 80 inches, which has a potential of having more shots, so it can get up to 6 shots, but likewise it can also get 1 or 2 shots. That only has a strength of 14, but its AP is ridiculous at -5, and it is 3 damage, so it could have a damage of 9 there, and you can re-roll the wounds against Titanic unit. So although it's let down by the strength Volcano Lance on the Castellan, it makes up with it with the AP -5 and the extra damage and the re-rolling on the Titanic. So it seems like it's a specific weapon for other Titan units. Anyway, back to this Seraptek, because I like to compare and contrast them all. The other weapon that's part of the same kind of weapon is called the Transdimensional Projector. Now this is much more short range. It is 24 inches, it's heavy D6, strength 6, but it is AP -3 and a damage of D3. And each time you roll a wound roll of 6+ for the weapon, the target suffers 1 mortal wound in addition to any other damage. So that's great. I love it how this Necron unit, whichever weapon system you go for, has the ability on 6s, the enemy could suffer mortal wounds as well as everything else that they're going to suffer. 24 inches is quite short range, but when you look at the movement speed of 16 inches, it's still got an effective range there of 40 inches. Yes, the strength is much less than the Obliterators, but the one thing I like about them keeping it as separate weapons is that it can target one unit with the Synaptic Obliterator and then another unit with the Transdimensional Projector. Brilliant keeping it separate like that rather than one weapon profile with 2 different firing modes. So you've got that very long ranged weapon that has a very high strength to take out sort of Titanic units or vehicles or high toughness units, and then you've got the Transdimensional Projectors, which could potentially get 12 shots at AP -3 with all those mortal wounds as well. Against hordes, I'd go for the Singularity Generators any time of day. But if you're going against Space Marines or Custodes or anything with a bit of armour, I'd definitely go for the Synaptic Obliterators and Transdimensional Projectors. If you're going against a Knight army, yeah, pick that as well. Although it's nice to have potentially 18 strength 8 shots, against other Titan kind of armies and high toughness armies, you want those strength 16 Obliterators. And then finally, the melee weapons, it has the Titanic forelimbs. Luckily, this weapon has 2 different profiles. You've got the Impaling Strike and the Reaping Sweep. So the Impaling Strike is a strength of ×2, so that'll be strength 16, AP -4 and a damage of 6, straight up. High damage, no mess in there. The Reaping Sweep is a strength of the user, which again is still 8, pretty good, but the AP drops down to -2, unfortunately, and the damage is only D3. However, you do make 3 hit rolls for each attack made with this weapon, and if you've got 6 attacks, you've got 18 hit rolls right there. So that is incredible. With this thing, I would not be scared of going against horde armies and it just sweeping through hordes of infantry, especially with the AP -2 and the damage of D3. It's going to be fantastic at clearing away hordes, likewise other Titans in combat. The war gear options, I think I've already mentioned it, but it can replace both its Singularity Generators with 2 Synaptic Obliterators and 2 Transdimensional Projectors, so it's one choice for both of the weapons. The abilities is Living Metal. So for a bit of a recap for Living Metal, at the beginning of your turn, the unit recovers 1 wound lost earlier in the battle. That's pretty nice, so it can do that every turn. It's just an added extra little bonus there. Containment Field. This model has a 5+ invulnerable save. that might come in handy. So it's got 3+ normal, 5+ invulnerable. Unstoppable Colossus. I don't think I've heard this one before. When this model moves, including when it falls back, it can move over infantry and swarm models as if they were not there, though it must end its move more than 1 inch from any enemy units. This model can fall back in the movement phase and still shoot and or charge in the same turn. In addition, this model can move and fire heavy weapons without suffering the penalty to its hit rolls. Finally, this model only gains a bonus to its save for being in cover if at least half of the model is obscured from the firer. So it works exactly like the super heavy walker rule for the Imperial Knights. Transdimensional Explosion. This works very similar to the dual plasma core explosion for a Knight Castellan. However, it's easier to set it off. If the model is reduced to 0 wounds, you roll a d6 before removing it from the battlefield. On a 4 to 5 it explodes and each unit within 2d6 suffers d6 mortal wounds, and on a 6 it explodes and breaches the transdimensional barrier and each unit within 3d6 suffers d6 mortal wounds. Amazing, 3d6 there. So even for that, for the transdimensional explosion, you want to be running this thing as close to the enemy as possible, especially with this Unstoppable Colossus rule as well. Run it straight up to enemy units. Towering Construct. If this model is not placed on a base, imagine it is on an irregular hexagonal base with each of the model's legs and forelimbs at a corner. As shown in the diagram below, you need to look at the rules for this one. If a leg forelimb is not physically on the ground, that corner is the spot on the ground level directly beneath the tip of the leg forelimb. For all rule purposes, this imaginary base counts as the model's actual base. You must measure distances to and from this base. From this base, no other models can move on or through it, and so on. So this is where putting the pose like this is really a bit of a detriment, because my base would be, I would say to the tips of the legs there, and I would be absolutely fine with that. And the reason being is because if you put it in the other pose and the legs were forward, they'd kind of be at a similar sort of level anyway. So I get that, and that's absolutely fine with me. I'd work something out with my opponent in terms of the rules, in terms of hitting it and its proximity and things like that to other models. Anyway, that is it for the rules. In summary, I think it's an absolute beast. It's got a high number of attacks. It's a very fast unit for its size. It's faster than any of the Cerastus Knights. Its weapons are incredible, whichever ones you go for. You've certainly got more options with the longer range Synaptic Obliterators and Transdimensional Projectors than you have with the Singularity Generator. And with the Singularity Generators, you're kind of putting all of your eggs in one basket, and I would only really use them if you're going against a Horde army, because you've got a potential there of 18 shots from an effective range of 52 inches, which is very nice. However, if you're going against Space Marines or an Imperial Knight army or something with a lot of armour, you can't go wrong with those Synaptic Obliterators, and this sort of punches it out of the park in terms of long-range weaponry for Necrons. We haven't really seen anything like this before, and I'm pleased that we get the opportunity to see it in this model. I can't wait for the new Necron models. They look amazing, and hopefully we'll get other models that will have a synergy with this, their own version of a Titan. I'm really looking forward to it, and I'll be doing the size comparisons with all those models with this bad boy too. So I hope you'll join me for all of the upcoming Necron content. Thank you ever so much for joining me today. Thank you for watching. The flesh is weak.